Okay. How did you become involved in the American Fisheries Society, and what did you decide to be, and why did you decide to be part of the fisheries management section?
Well, when I was a young biologist, I went to I don't even recall what meeting it was, but some Southern Division meeting. Sat in on a reservoir committee meeting. I saw Fred Harris, Larry Olmsted, Larry Agus in front of the room talking about well, at the time it was the Barclay Rotenone job. And I can remember sitting in the back of the room, not being part of any of the discussion, and just thinking, wow, I got to get me some of this. And it was kind of an eye-opener. It made me realize that there were a whole lot more smarter people out there than me, and if I was going to make the most of my career, I was going to have to engage with these people, and that was through AFS. So it's that was kind of the start of it, and then I just got involved and attended as many meetings as I could, met as many other professionals as I could, and that was really a big part of my career. A lot of my ideas for research efforts came out of what I heard at professional meetings.
So did anybody in particular get you involved in the management section, or is that something you decided?
I was at an AFS meeting, I believe it was in San Antonio, and I remember Tom Gengerke was president at the time, and it just was one of those deals. I was at the meeting, decided to sit in on the section meeting, and again, I believe it was, they were talking about a sampling project that Don Gablehouse had put together, was gathering all different sampling methods for different species of fish that different agencies were using, and a booklet was being put out, and I think this was right at the tail end of that. And at the time, I was starting to get interested in sampling evaluations, and it piqued my interest, and I think I started out as being a regional newsletter editor the next year, and kind of worked my way into the secretary-treasurer position, and got to do it for 2 years because no one else wanted to do it, or 2 terms. And just kind of a natural progression into president-elect and president. And it was, again, it's the people that you meet at these meetings, and the leadership skills that you gain by talking to these folks that it just becomes so much value when you leave the meeting. It was always kind of interesting how you sit in there and you listen, and you're not really thinking at the time what you're gaining. It's after you get home and you start thinking about the ramifications and things, and the brain cells start churning, and then those seeds get planted, and that really is the people is the real resource.
Yeah. So kind of along the same lines there, how did being involved with AFS help your career?
Well, I think, many ways, but primarily going to scientific meetings, you look at the type of work that other people are doing. It always tweaked your interest. I remember going to one meeting, I don't remember what meeting it was, but one of Hal Schramm's graduate students was talking about comparing otoliths and scales for aging crappie, I believe, and came back to Oklahoma and worked on crappie for the next 19 years. So those are the types of things in a day-to-day thing that influenced my career. But I think more than anything else, I learned my leadership skills through AFS, met just a tremendous number of very, very smart people, and met some really good friends. And they're still friends to this day, although we're all getting kind of long in the tooth and retired. We still maintain contact with a lot of them, and when I go to AFS meetings to this day, there's the only opportunity I get to see most of these people. it really is a learning experience, and you know, I always try to tell the new biologists that once you get out of school is when your education really starts to begin, and you really need to lean on other people because your problems are not unique. That fisheries issues are somewhat the same. The approaches to solving them may be a little different, and you can learn from your colleagues.
So did you have a mentor or any individual or individuals who greatly influenced your career?
Well, I had many. Probably one of my most influential was Mike Vandenabel. But you think back, and Rich Noble. I can remember going to meetings, and it was always Rich's students giving the presentations. But when you went to the hospitality suite, Rich was always there, and you just sit and listen to him talk fish. It was just incredible. A lot of my contemporaries, biologists working at the same time, Scott Van Horn, good friend of mine, and really well, back in those days, he was North Carolina Wildlife Resources star. And Scott is in the Hall of Excellence. Fred Harris, Scott's boss, another tremendous leader, Hall of Excellence inductee, past AFS president. Steve Miranda. I mean, they're just Dave Willis. Just so many people that you meet over the years that you just take a little bit of everybody and kind of shape yourself along those lines. So it's just a tremendous opportunity to get to meet some icons. They're not icons when you're talking to them. They're just a friend of yours. But down the road, they become that level.
So did you ever consider any other career, and why?
I was an Earth Day baby. Came out of high school right during that time period, went to college with the big idea of being an ecology major. Got down to University of Wisconsin and found out there was no such degree. And got on a work-study project with a couple of graduate students working on fish, and just kind of took that into graduate school and started in Oklahoma and was here my whole career. And so no, I thought of other careers when I was working, but it was like carpentry and things like that you like to do on the side. But no, I never really considered anything besides what I was doing.
So how do you think AFS can help prepare our profession for the challenges we will face ahead?
Well, it's not that they can prepare. They do prepare. You just have to go and get prepared. Fishery science is tremendously complicated, and you can't learn it all by reading books. And so if you go to these professional meetings and first off listen to the presentations, but the real learning comes by talking to the folks in the halls over a beer, somehow or another, to pick their brains and really ask questions. Fisheries is becoming more and more complicated. The fish are a minor part of fisheries, and the other components are the ones that are becoming more and more critical moving forward. A fisheries biologist is going to have so many more skills than I had to have when I was working to be successful. Habitat is getting to be a tremendous limiting factor, and it's going to be more and more so moving forward. And an individual can't learn those things on his own. He has to lean on other scientists to get that knowledge, and that's where AFS comes in. And for someone to get a job as a biologist and then go park themselves out into a remote location and stay there for the next 35 years are really not only doing themselves a disservice, they're doing the resource a disservice.
So what does being inducted into the Hall of Excellence mean to you?
Well, it's an honor, and there's no greater honor than being recognized by your peers, and that's what this is all about. It's just culmination of your career, and very humbling. I went to the Hall of Excellence a couple of summers ago and just looked at the plaques up on the wall, and some of these folks I read when I was in college, and to think that you're going to be hanging next to them someday, it's you don't even, well, it's not even on the radar screen. So yeah, it of all the things that I was able to accomplish during my career, that is the pinnacle.
Speaking of that, what do you believe is or was your biggest contribution to the fisheries field?
It's hard for someone to self-evaluate. That's for other people to really decide. I spent the bulk of my career working on crappie sampling and management issues, and certainly the bulk of my publications were related to that. So I think just from a effort put forth, that would be one of the things I would look at. I think I was able to influence sampling methodology to some degree, but the parts that I enjoyed the most were working with young biologists, students. That was more personally rewarding to me than the work itself.
So what words of wisdom do you share with these young biologists and students?
Well, I think, and talked about this a little bit already, I think the biggest thing is once you finish college, whether it's undergraduate or graduate degrees, and get on the job, that's when your learning really starts. And I know most graduate students, like I did when I came out of school, think they know all the answers, and you don't. It's a complicated science, and your learning really starts when you start on the job, and that's where AFS and professional meetings come in, whereas you can interact with other folks that have doing the same thing, doing similar things, or maybe doing completely different things that may influence how you approach your job. And you cannot be an effective biologist by never leaving the office or leaving your own lakes. You have to learn from other folks, and that is really the take-home message, I think, when you start talking about AFS, is that AFS is going to give you what you want out of it. You have to be active, or there's nothing to offer. So, and it's, I have always, when I was in a position to make those kinds of decisions, I thought it was extremely important for new hires, young biologists, to go to professional meetings and publish papers, write. It's all part of the learning process. And you have to be a critical thinker to be effective on your job. And that's where interactions with other folks, not just on a listening to presentation basis, but even a critical evaluation of your writing is hugely important.
We kind of covered this a little bit already. Give you another chance to add to this thought if you had anybody else to think about. Which fellow inductees influenced you the most, and how? And you've already talked about Noble and Van den Abel and Van Horn. Is there anybody else that you need to include here? Or?
Well, I've known Don Gablehouse my whole career. Don started out at the Fisheries Research Facility in Emporia, Kansas. We were 4 hours away. Dave Willis was working there at the time, Tom Mosier, Jimmy Stevens, all excellent biologists, and working on the same type of southern reservoir fisheries issues that we were here at the Oklahoma Fisheries Research Lab. So we talked a lot, not only at meetings but on the telephone, and bouncing ideas off each other. There's just a huge number of people. Phil Batoli, Mike Messina. I mean, there's just taking the opportunity to talk to these contemporaries at these meetings was just, and you meet them, you end up with a problem, something that perhaps a little advice on. You pick up the phone, you give them a call, and pick their brains, and they're pretty big brains to pick. So it's very important to make those types of contacts.